In studio, we're continuing with our analysis of that in-depth coverage of Budget 2026-2027. We're going to get into that conversation. Two ladies join us this morning. Valentine Mueni is a policy research and budgeting at Haki Jami. A very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Karibu Sana. Nelly Chepkemoi is a policy and advocacy manager with We Care. We're going to be tracking the money and actually asking ourselves questions that can we see where this budgeting money goes to. But really quickly, Dennis would like to share today's proverb with you. We'd love to get your interpretation.
I think before all else, we just need to say amen. Let's say amen in unison.
Amen.
We've just been blessed by the gentleman. How do you know that? Yeah, but today we are in Guinea, and the proverb that we get from Guinea says, the river never drinks its own water, and the trees never eat their own fruits. How would you interpret it, Nelly?
Good proverb, and I think I would interpret it bringing it back home. We are making a budget, yeah, but we want to extract more because we are saying we want to plan for the Kenyans, but we are also taking more from them. So I think for me that is my interpretation, and for that speaks to really, and you know, when you start to look at it prospectively in relation to how people are struggling to survive, to even make ends meet, then you see the unfairness and the inequality that is coming out of how much is being extracted from the people we intend to plan for their lives to move forward.
Yeah, Mueni, how would you interpret it?
The river never drinks from its own, and the tree never eats from its fruit. I'd look at it outwardly. Nelly has looked at it inwardly. Maybe now looking at it like the tree is supposed to sustain the rest of the environment. Its good is the rest will benefit from its benefits, same as the river. It will not benefit from its own existence, but others will benefit from its existence. So it could be a good thing if we look at it like the river exists to serve others, same as the tree exists to serve others. Do I need to bring it to the governance?
This is where we say inward-outward interpretation check.
Definitely. You know, and if we look at if government is there to serve the people and the things that you put in place are supposed to actually make that work, let's then look at the budget and ask ourselves the questions. The big numbers that we are seeing, 758 billion education. We're looking at hundreds of billions into certain health, into the health sector. We're looking at security and defense, agriculture, according to the CS as early as this morning, talking about the fact that agriculture is where they're actually putting a lot of the attention. So now, when we hear the words, can we see, start with you, Mueni, can we actually see the physical manifestation, tangibility of these numbers?
I think I'd begin by saying that government services are just as good as how the public experiences them. So regardless of how much we actually invest in them, and coincidentally, these top 5 sectors haven't changed per se. Education is still the one getting top priority. Roads, the sequence is still the same in terms of top 5 sectors. But again, coincidentally, the same top 5 sectors are still the ones Kenyans are complaining the most about. I think we've really had there are no schools, there are no education. What is, I think it's not translating per se. And then since we're already currently in the 4th quarter of the 2025-2026 budget, if we look at the control of budget and the indications from there, I think we have the 9-month implementation report that could also guide us to see when we started the year, what we allocated, is it really translating to what the Kenyans feel? I would say not really per se. The allocations are good on paper, but when it comes to translating and Kenyans actually feeling it in the ground, it is not really translating. There are still persistent gaps when it comes to the actual service provision and service delivery. Say per se, let us look at education. We can confidently say, and the government likes to use, it's getting the priority and the biggest proportion. But again, when it go to our schools, during the budget process, I engaged a number of communities just to hear their perspectives so that we could submit a memorandum that had their input. And most of their questions were like, why do we still have to pay money directly to schools? When we go to school, you're being told, as a parent, you have to add more money since the capitation isn't enough. Yet the government will tell us, education had the highest. So as a percentage share of the total budget, it would look nice. But as a percentage share of the needs in the sector, we are still having very big deficits in these specific sectors, especially the ones that are relating to social services.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Nelly, I want us to look at the budget as it were. Yeah? So we look at education. We know the problems that do exist in education, yet it has the biggest vote in allocation as we speak today. So you talk about ghost schools, ghost students, inadequate infrastructure as well for schools. You go to healthcare, same story. You go to security, many would say, okay, they get more budget so that they shoot us whenever we go to the street. So in terms of value for money, are Kenyans relating big budgets with proper services, or does it remain at the budget policy statement?
Thank you. And I think that is where we should actually, as Kenyans, start from. And I want to agree with Valentine here. When we say, for example, education is taking the hugest, I think 27% of the whole budget, that is the 781 billion. We must start interrogating then as citizens whether that relates to the actual needs that education sector is there to serve. So if you interrogate further, let's just go to the numbers, like do insist. With this 781, I think the huge budget goes specifically to teachers. If you look at their allocation, it is over 400 billion, I think, going to TSC specifically. So when you start now dividing that, you've already reduced almost half of that allocation to teachers. And we all know that teachers, or rather that budget is meant to pay salaries for the teachers. But then when you go back to the books, the budget books, for example, if you look at that draft estimate budget from this, and going further, that allocation, you see 54.6 billion goes to free secondary. But then look at what has been allocated for pre-primary. I mean, for free primary education, it is 7 billion. While we are still seeing that, yes, education is taking the hugest chunk of the budget, but what is being allocated to the young learners in Kenya is only 7 billion shillings. And then moving further, I know we have done this work together with Valentine as an advocacy group out here. And we have analyzed the budget where you find we have also the existence of a national education sector strategic plan, the NES, for example, if I shorten it. And if you look at now the public finance law that regulates us, Section 38 of the Public Finance Act demands that all program-based budgets should actually address or rather have outcome indicators. But when we look at this budget for education, for example, you're getting their indicators are not speaking to what is in their strategic plan. So we are already missing out the intended purpose for that money when we don't consider some of what the strategic plan tells us we should do. And then when it now comes to budgeting, we are looking at underfunding. Let me take another angle. If we look at the economic survey that was recently released, you look at what government is planning in the budget, still in the education sector, we are planning for close to 6.5 million learners in the primary, or rather in the basic education that covers from primary up to secondary level. We are planning, or rather budgeting, for 6.5 million. The economic survey says we have, if you look at that demographic of the basic education sector, it says we should be planning for 8 point. So in essence, we are even under planning and under budgeting, because then that shows the inequality where we are leaving out close to 1.9 children out of the learning, planning and budgeting.
So for purposes of clarity, who conducts the economic survey year on year?
It is government.
Government?
Yes.
Primarily from the Treasury?
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
So the folks who work in the back end are the ones who develop the economic survey.
Literally, yes.
So in terms of planning, they know this is where we should be going.
Yeah.
So why, I guess for both of you, wouldn't the budget, which is your tool for how to spend money, would not mirror the economic survey that you yourself developed? Why wouldn't that happen?
I'd look at it as it is a lack of goodwill from the government. We already know. And I think the easiest thing for us as Kenya, we always have long-term plans. We have Vision 2030. We have broken it into medium terms. Each sector has a specific plan for 5 years. So already from the onset, and there are projections in terms of growth, even if it's growth of learners, the projection is there for 5 years on. So it's not something we come and start guessing when the year is there. So either, and then we're also having a lot of allocation that are going to coordination of government services, but we are seeing different state departments not speaking on each other. It's one function that is being done by two. You see child protection services, some of their functions intersect with the education, but we're still seeing their plans not aligning. So the budget may be informed by one of the reports that was submitted by one of the state departments, not the other. So we have weak links in the coordination of the government itself. We are producing a report by one entity within the government, yet the ones budgeting are using a different report. So it's mostly lack of coordination, really.
Could be deliberate as well, because if you know that this is the numbers that we need, and you cannot go ahead and plan with those numbers, then it shows a deliberate plan by the government officials to even underfund. And for me, that speaks to the inequality bit of it. And then there comes in the aspect of pending, or rather the recurrent expenditures. While we are planning for what is to happen ahead, we still have all these things that we are supposed to pay. And even if you look at the allocations and distributions for every other sector, a huge chunk goes to the recurrent expenditure, while what is meant for development is really either not allocated or is being reduced. And that speaks then to the question that Ndu asked.
And I think when you look at the economic survey, that is an important document then that budget planners rely on to give credence on what kind of budget it is they're looking at. But already we've established that that document that is prepared by government does not feature or features little in the preparation of that budget, right? So one then asks the question, if we are not taking the economic survey report to prepare the budget, then what guarantees do we have that even the budget as presented will be implemented to its fullness?
Maybe I can begin.
Yes.
And it's not just the economic survey. See, every sector has a sector report, which they also submit to the Treasury. So right now we're in 26-27. They have submitted a sector report that has the projections of the needs they'll have, financial needs, and both financial, based on their financial projections, 3 years on. So the economic survey is there. That's one very credible report you can rely on. Each sector has also submitted their needs way in advance. And then now, do we have any guarantees? I don't believe so, because this is where now the Controller of Budget and Auditor General come in. I was really looking at the report by the Controller of Budget, and I'd really surprise you by saying there are some very small state departments that are already overspending by more than 1,000%.
By small, you mean?
I'd say not. You see how we've already established the top 5 in terms of allocations? Some which had close to 0 point something allocation when we were making the budget, and even when it came to the supplementary, they didn't have increased allocation. But when we look at what has already been expended by these state departments, let me just give actual examples. Say, for example, State House, the exchequer releases is at 31st March was 161%, right? When we looked at the budget, it wasn't top 5. Office of the Deputy President, 129%, is at 31st March. Internal Security and National Administration as well is 105%. And then this one really caught my eye, the State Department for Special Programs, 1,419%. 1,000. It even sounds ridiculous.
I think you're going to need to say that again.
Say that again,
1,419%. They have over-absorbed their budget by that. That means now there are loopholes within the public finance that are being misused deliberately. Most of these allocations are now coming under the Article 223 of the Constitution, which allows for some appropriations that were not in the Appropriation Act. So the government is really playing us deliberately, because then if we compare the same to education, basic education for the same period, it was 49%. when we are making the budget, we said they had the largest chunk, but now looking at how much money has been released to them, it's now coming to only 49% of this 30% that we celebrated when we were starting. So there are really no safeguards. And then as a country, I don't think we take seriously the violations of PFM Act. You see how we treat other violations of other acts, very serious crimes. We are really contravening the PFM Act, but we're not seeing the same effort when it comes to now people actually facing consequences for the same, such as these ones.
Then what effects does that have to the overall performance of economy or the betterment of the lives of Kenyans? Because at the end of the day, this budget is supposed to serve Mwananchi. But if we are seeing we have departments that are overspending, there is no accountability on the same. While we look at other critical services, healthcare, education, we're talking about 49%, not even half of that has been expended to this. What does that mean to the overall performance of Mwananchi's life and quality of it?
And I'm going to actually pick from the guarantee you were asking. Already from what she's saying, and I'll pick from her mind, we have sector reports that ideally tell you even what is supposed to be allocated to a sector, for example. And let's just pick the education bit, for example. Even with that 780 billion, we are still 42% short of what is required. Yes. So by the fact that we are even budgeting and planning, we are already starting from a budget shortfall, because we already have a shortfall where the sector report says you require this, but what is allocated falls short of what is required. So before we even start, we are already operating from a budget shortfall. And then to make it worse, we have the debt issue. For me, that is a very problematic issue, because then that, if you look at what we want to pay in debt, is already double or 3 times what should have gone to the education. So already we have the budget shortfall already. We have some data gaps, like I've already told you what is in the economic survey and what is being planned for. So all those are not guaranteed safeguards for young people. I mean, for Kenyans and even young people at large. And now looking at the economic outlook of it, is that there's also, I know we are talking of the budget and the expenditure side, but we also have to look at how are we raising this money to cater for the expenditure. And that brings me to your question as to how the outlook of the economy is to the citizens of Kenya. The inflation is also going high. And I know we are talking of the budget of being 4.8, but I want to bring a very controversial statement that perhaps maybe we might be operating with a 2 point something. Because in that 4.8 trillion budget, there's half of it untouched that is supposed to go to debt servicing. So when you start with that, it's already disappropriating, I mean, it is disadvantaging Kenyans, because then what is left to the education? What is left to the healthcare? What is left to manufacturing and production? We are a country that is economically moving through services. So picking up from how that looks, right now, as a person, now the public debt issue, we are crowding out private sector, we are crowding out small enterprises, businesses, people who should be moving the economy. But then now when we have a situation where now we are competing as citizens with the government to be able to access credit to fund our lives, to fund our businesses, then you already have an outlook of how that looks. People will not be able to afford credit for their businesses, hence loss of business opportunities. There's not going to be a fair business environment. When you speak to the issue of employment, every year we keep giving out students from graduation. And I'm bringing still the aspect of budgeting, for example, with the higher education and the TVET aspect. Last year, for example, we had 993,000 learners coming from the KCSE examination period. But what are we planning? We are planning for 600 and something thousand. So already government is telling us that by design, we don't want to care about this number of people coming out from school. So where does that lead them to? These are people who are supposed to probably be looking for employment. So therein lies the crisis of unemployment. And then when you look at the taxation bit, we want to even infiltrate the little gig economy side that these people who may not be able to cover the formal employment can be able to access, but we are following that part where they are getting money. So it's really a crisis. We're in a fiscal crisis in the country.
So it sounds to me, when even as we wind this down, that going deeper into a crisis, even with a new budget reading, and it's not really solving anything. That's what it sounds like as we get into it.
That is actually what it is per se. Every year on, it's incremental allocations, but they don't really translate to any increase in the value and the quality. If we invest in it, it's not improving efficiency in education, efficiency in healthcare, how fast you access the services. You know, when you go to the local dispensary, the local hospitals, people are being sent to buy medicines from different places. Yet we are saying health was among the top 5 huge sectors. So already, by committing to whatever amount we are committing, it doesn't necessarily translate to any improvement in the lives of Kenyans, in the improvement in the service delivery, which is also a bad approach to it because we are still normalizing it. We are sitting comfortable in the situation saying this is what we always do. We will wait again next year. We have the same conversations. We lobby for incremental allocations towards education, towards health. So it's about time we now shift our focus more on actually translating the allocations into actual service delivery. The accountability bit, we can't really sit down and just say it was enough to allocate. The accountability matters more at this point, since the allocations, we believe, already Nelly has talked about the deficits and the domestic debt. We don't want to push the government into increasing the debt. Can we now just say with whatever allocations we have, how can they actually translate to improved services? So we need to shift our focus from the allocations to the accountability. And it's interesting because the Auditor General Office is one of the underfunded offices. And they were saying now it's limiting their, their independence and how they can really audit these offices. So if we want to look at the full circle of how money translates from the statement to the service delivery, we also need to enhance the accountability bits.
Maybe just to add a bit.
In addition to that, what would be quick wins, things that you could actually do to fix the bugs?
Okay. I think it's like I already read it. Because I wanted to say where I find a gap now, even in the allocations, as Valentine puts it, is once it goes to Parliament, you see only lumped up sums of amounts. You don't get to see the distribution the way we are saying. The percentage, or rather, for example, the education sector, out of the 781 billion, this is what is going to free primary. This is what is going to teachers. This is what is going to probably solve other things. So you don't get to see that in the budget document, for example, that goes to Parliament. And for me, that is where I find the gap, because if we are talking about accountability and oversight for them as lawmakers, then they should be able to tell some of these gaps from that point, because whatever is presented to them is a lumped up amount. So for me, my number one solution is probably the Treasury needs to somehow, because when you get to engage them, they tell you that they get this, we were engaging the Ministry of Education someday, and they were saying they get their numbers from the economic survey, from the Kenya National KNBS. But then when you look at these institutions, they are even able to tell us as to the number of learners as males, as females, the number of schools per ward up to that level. But when it comes to budget, you cannot trace how many women, or rather how many girls as learners have been distributed this. When you go to the budget of TSC, for example, go to the details in the TSC, they can be able to give you the details of how many teachers are receiving this money from the budget. But go to the budget books, it's just a lumped up amount.
All these things are things to watch as we go towards that home stretch. Later on today at about 3, when the CS Treasury does give the budget speech. We want to say a very good, big thank you. Valentine Mueni is a policy and research and budgeting at Haki Jami, and Nelly Chep-Kemoi, Policy and Advocacy Manager at We Care. Thank you for being here with us this morning. It's been the Situation Room, special coverage of Budget 2026-2027. And Dennis, I've been here with you, Dennis, later on News Desk to give more information as it comes through. Today marks the beginning of the world's greatest sporting event, and that's the World Cup. And Robinson Okenya is on standby to take us through to that home stretch as we come to the end of this session of the budget coverage. Thank you for being here with us.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.